You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
Good morning, Arizona, and welcome to our guests from around the world. I'm Joe Brett.
I'm David Lucier.
And you're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour. We're excited today. We have a living history book here with us today, A Legend of Aviation, Major General Carl, call sign Duke Schneider. Welcome aboard, General.
Yeah, glad to be here.
We're so happy. General Schneider and David and I are on the board of directors of an organization called the Veterans Heritage Project, and which our students interview veterans, and the stories are compiled into books, and the books go to the Library of Congress, and of course the veteran gets to keep a copy for himself and for his family for posterity. And that's how we all met. And General Schneider has a wonderful story, and we've included
not just wonderful, but unbelievable.
Unbelievable. I mean, we're going to go, well, we'll get into it in a second, but he is history. And if you've loved aviation like I have loved aviation, Carl Schneider was the hero when I was putting model planes together.
What kind of airplanes did you put together? What was your favorite?
P-51.
All right. Go Mustangs.
Go Mustangs. And that's the plane that General Schneider broke in on. And I also want to acknowledge that I have some of my group, you know, we've had these Green Beret guys and all these mud ponders out there, but I'm happy to say that we got some facts, some Army facts out there. The Cat Killers and the Sundowners, my guys, are listening in specifically to hear this show. So welcome, General. We're so happy to have you with us.
Okay, thank you.
We want to start off. You are actually a veteran of World War II, and can you tell us how you got into aviation and got into the Air Force?
Well, my dad was in the old balloon corps in World War I.
No kidding.
And at Fort Sill.
Wow.
And they used to talk about that a lot when we were kids. So I think that sort of got us interested initially in aviation and just the Air Force. And of course, that's the old Army Air Corps, I guess. Well, I guess he was just in the regular Army. I don't know what the balloon
He was an
corps.
artillery guy, right? They sent him up to be an artillery
That's
spot.
right, yeah, artillery. Anyway, my brother and I were raised on a farm in West Texas, and we liked to ride horses and drive tractors and motorcycles, but we hated cotton, and we had to chop cotton and chop the weeds out of cotton, and then you had to pull cotton in the fall, and you walk down on your knees, and you pull these bolls off of the cotton stalks, and your hands bled, and your head hurt, and your back hurt, and your knees hurt. And you're pulling this miserable cotton sack behind you, putting cotton bolls in there. And then you went down to the end of the row and you dumped it into a wagon. And then you took it to the gin with horses. We didn't even have a tractor at that time. And we hated every minute of it. So one day we were out chopping cotton, about 95% humidity and 95% temperature, and an old World War I airplane, bi-wing airplane, pulled up and did acrobatics over us. And I turned to my brother and I said, "That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a pilot and get out of this miserable cotton patch." So he said, "Well, I will too." So that's all we thought about from then on. So we came a very poor family. We had an 800 square foot house with 6 kids, mother and dad, no running water, no electricity, and no bathroom. Bathroom was about 100 yards down behind the barn.
Wow.
And
downwind.
But we did have correction. We had running water. Mother said, "Boys, run, get a bucket of water." Well, so that was our running water. But anyway, during the Depression, we had these sandstorms come through about once a week, rolling sandstorms. It looked 30, 40,000 feet high. And it gets so dusty, you couldn't even see across the room, literally. And of course, we just had an old frame house with no insulation, and the sand would just pile up under the windowsills, and you could clean off the table and 2 minutes later you could write your name in the table again. So
This is like the Dust Bowls that we
it
talked
was a
about
Dust Bowl, yeah,
from the
really.
Depression area.
And we had 7 years where we didn't really make a crop. You know, you'd get maybe have some rain, and you'd get a good crop, and then the hail would come along and knock it out. And we didn't have any hail insurance in those days. We had no medical insurance, and so it was a rough life. And but it's a happy life. I had good parents. My mom and dad were good folks, and despite all that, we had a lot of fun.
Sure.
And we worked hard. You got up in the morning at 5:30 and milked cows and fed pigs, and then you came in and had breakfast. And if it's school year, you put on you had two suits of clothes. You had a shirt and a pair of slacks, and a shirt and a pair of overalls, and a pair of shoes. One pair of shoes, and that was it. And my mother, I think, had 2 dresses, and she made all my sisters' dresses out of flour sacks. At that time, flour came in these real printed type cloth, and so all the mothers would make my sisters never had a bought dress, I don't think, until they went to high school.
That's amazing.
And,
That's amazing.
So my dad lived to 95, and just before he died, I said, "Dad, how much money did you make during the Depression?" Cash. He said, "I averaged $250 a year cash." You can imagine that now, raising 6 kids, and never went hungry because my 2 grandfathers homesteaded that land back in the early 1900s and lived right together. So when my granddad on my mother's side passed away, he divided his property. It had 4 daughters, so my mother got 1/4 of the property. So that's all that survived, that helped us survive during the Depression. We didn't have to pay on land, so we didn't lose our farm, which all of other farmers around us lost their farms.
Gosh.
And the bank took over their farms. But we'd butcher a pig, and of course my dad butchered everything, a pig and a calf, and we had plenty of chickens, and mother always raised a big truck garden, so we had plenty to eat, and no pesticide. We didn't do any spraying or anything. So I was just saying before the meeting here, all of us are in our 70s and 80s now, and none of us have ever really been sick. And I think it's because we really had good food when we were growing up.
Sure.
No pesticides, and fresh food, fresh milk, and so forth. So anyway, despite all that, we had a good time. And of course, everything that was around the church, the school, and home. That's what you had. You know, we didn't have radio. We didn't have electricity.
Is that a German family you're from? Or no?
Yeah, my dad was German, and his great-grandfather came, or my great-grandfather came from Germany in 1890. He didn't like what the Kaiser was doing, so he came over, had 25 cents in his pocket, didn't know a word of English. And my grandfather, Curlin, came from his father came from Ireland because of the potato famine.
That's how my ancestors got here.
Yeah, that's how they got over there. But anyway, they both homesteaded land up there, and both of them ended up very well-to-do guys.
So then you're 18, and World War II was in full swing, and you're saying you're still thinking of the biplane twisting and turning over you picking cotton, and so you want to sign up somewhere.
Well, I read about all the fighter pilots in World War II. I read every book I could find about all the fighter pilots in World War II.
And you must have read about Joe Foss, your future friend.
I remember looking at Time magazine with Joe's picture on the front. Man, it'd be great to meet this guy.
Yeah,
I've
seen that
having
photo.
Breakfast with him every Monday morning for 20 years here in Scottsdale, and wonderful guy. So that's how I got into the Joe Foss program.
But you putting model airplanes together that you flew and that Joe Foss flew. I mean, I was, wow, you guys were heroes to us. And so at 17 or 18, you join up. Well,
I wanted to be a fighter pilot, so I went down to recruiting. Well, back up just a little bit. We all had FFA, Future Farmers of America, and I had a pig that I won a award at the county fair. So because of that, my FFA teacher wrote up a recommendation to what was called Future Farmers of America, and if you got one of the scholarships, you got a $30 a month scholarship for college, and so I got it was sponsored by Sears and Roebuck. So I got a $30 a month scholarship to go to college 1 year. But of course, I didn't have any extra money, so I shoveled cow manure out of the college farm and morning and night.
What college?
Texas Tech in Lubbock.
No kidding.
And so I'd go out and shovel all the cow manure out early in the morning, get up about 5 o'clock and do that. And then walk into class. I didn't have time to go back to the dorm, so all the class would move over to the other side of the room. I was a rather different young fellow. So. But anyway, at the end of a year, I said, I'm out of money. So I had a bet one day with a bunch of buddies that I could hitchhike to California in 48 hours. So you know how you're a crazy kid. So I got out on the highway with a shaving kit and hitchhiked to California. And the deal was if I got there within 48 hours and we had a code, if I could check in, then they had to pay my way back by bus to come back to Texas. So I got out there and I stayed with an aunt and uncle, and I ended up working in a trailer factory, Fruhoff Trailer Factory.
In what city in California?
And we're living in Costa Mesa.
Oh yeah.
And in Montebello, and working in this trailer factory. And I had to drill 256 holes in the bed of this 18-wheel truck bed, and then put a little piece of tar in between and a little piece of leather, and then I had to put 256 rivets in there, and then drill them in. And I was between a paint booth and a welding booth. I said, I don't think this is my cup of tea. So
That's your strong suit.
I called this buddy of mine, and we'd been talking when we were over at Texas Tech about going in the Air Force. He said, come on back. I said, let's go down and join up. And so I got back to Texas and went down to the recruiting office and told this sergeant, I said, I want to be a fighter pilot. He said, sign right here, son. We'll get you right in. And after I got in, found out pilot training wasn't even open. You know, they closed it after World War II. So I go to Lackland, went through basic training, and then got assigned to Lowry Air Force Base. And they classified me as an auto mechanic because my brother and I had bought a motorcycle. I found an old motorcycle in a barn when I was 14 and he was 13, a Harley Davidson over, and we tore it down right down to the last nut and bolt, put it back together, and it ran. And so we rode that while we were in high school. And anyway, I went through basic training, then went to Lowry, Colorado. And I was supposed to go to auto mechanic school, and I got to fussing about it. I said, I don't want to be an auto mechanic. I want to be in airplanes. And because I felt like they'd open pilot training pretty soon. Anyway, on a Saturday morning, I got to fussing about it, and I went over to personnel, and there's an old sergeant over there sitting in this great big room in personnel. And I walked in and I said, sir, I don't want to go to auto mechanics. I want anything to do with aviation. He said, don't call me sir, I'm a sergeant. I said, yes, sir. So he scuffed around in his desk and he finally found the thing. And he said, hey, okay, son. He said, here's one slot in remote control turret mechanic school and B-29s. He said, it's a tough school and a big washout rate, but it's a 6-month school. And he said it's the only one in the Air Force that will automatically promote you from buck private to corporal if you graduate. And I said, I'll take it. So, man, I started off and went through and did well and made corporal so I could join the NCO club. At that time, they called an NCO.
That's a motivator.
But it was for me. Anything to get me in the club was a motivator for me.
Anyway, I went to Roswell, New Mexico then in B-29s and worked.
What year was this? Was the war phasing out by that time?
47.
Oh, so the war's over. And,
yeah.
And how old are you? 18 now at this time?
Well, yeah, I guess I was 18 at that time. So I busted my knuckles there on B-29s, and I flew with the wing commander a couple of times, and who was a big full colonel, retired later on as a 4-star. But this is another story down the line.
Yeah.
But this is anyway. I finally got my orders to go to pilot training. They just reopened an experimental class. And they started half of us off in T-6s, and they're trying to accelerate because they knew we were going to be coming into jet aircraft, and they wanted to see if we could start, instead of starting at PTs, a little bi-wing airplane. the half the class went to PTs, and tall guys went to T6s. They very scientifically divided the whole cadet class up, and it chopped the line. If you're below a certain height, you went to PTs. If you're a tall guy, you went to T6s. So I flew T6s in primary and basic, and did well, and graduated in top part of the class. But I still got orders to multi-engine, and I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So I worked my way up through the cadet chain and got to the commandant of cadets, who was a full colonel. And I walked in there I got a 5-minute appointment, which was really rare because they wouldn't, he's a big gun at that time. I was a rear ranks ready cadet. And I walked in real smart aleck, and I said, "Sir, I'm not going to multi-engine." And boy, he came out of his chair and chewed my butt out for 15 minutes. And I thought, well, that ended my Air Force career. And he walked out and slammed the door. A little bit, he came back in and said, "Sit down, son." He said, "I don't care what the Air Force said." He said, "You're going to fighters. You got the best spirit I've ever seen." I've never seen an 18-year-old kid come in and talk to a full colonel like that. So anyway, that's how I got to come to pilot to cadets. I mean, to Willie here to fly P-51s.
And whereabouts was that? Williams Air Force Base?
Yeah, Williams Air Force Base.
Which is now part of the ASU campus.
So
we're just getting a 5-minute warning here, so that's what that means.
Anyway, we had a piggyback P-51. They took the gas tank out of the back, and you're supposed to shoot 3 or 4 touch and go landings. We had all these little auxiliary fields all around the Phoenix area here. And I'd come in and I'd ricochet off because that long nose up there, and here I'm sitting way back, and all I had is a stick and a throttle and rudder pedals, and I'd ricochet off the deck, and the instructor said, "I'm going to wash you out." Said, "You can't land this airplane." I said, "If I can get in that front seat, I can land it." And he said, "Well, I'm going to put you up for a check ride." So anyway, we landed and taxied in, and you sit down under the wing here, and the check pilot will come out and talk to you. So a little bit, this really nice captain came out, really nice guy, and he calmed me down and asked me about my family. And finally, after a few minutes, he said, "Can you fly this airplane in the front seat?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, get in and go fly." So that's how I ended up checking out the P-51. No chase pilot, nothing. You just get in.
How did you land in the front seat?
Oh, no problem. I never had a problem.
Just slipped it in there?
Oh, I squeaked her in,
Oh, man.
and graduated in top part of the class. And, we had the acrobatics and all formation, a lot of great stuff. And
so you're 19 now.
Yeah,
you left the cotton fields, and now you're honking. You're 19 years old, and you're in the hottest fighter plane at the time.
Yeah,
the
at the time.
P-51 Mustang, and you're
loving every minute of it.
Oh, you had to be.
But we didn't have simulators in those days, and so I used to go down, and before I started flying, we had I guess about a week or so of academics. I'd go down and sit in the cockpit all weekend. I'd get my helmet. We had these old leather helmets. And I'd get my chute and helmet and my Dash 1, and I'd sit in the cockpit all weekend. I'd just get out and go take a leak or go get a hamburger. And I'd literally sit there all day Saturday and all day Sunday. Because I knew.
Going through all that, checking yourself out in the instrumentation, etc.
I thought myself through a flight, what do I have to do to start the engine? How do I taxi out? What are the radio calls? And so when I started flying, it's a piece of cake. I just felt like I'd been in.
It was like another Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, it's great. So that was my.
And this is Williams Air Force Base.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So anyway, then I got my first assignment out of there was to P-84s. At Shaw, South Carolina. These are old straight wing P-84s. I think they started calling them F-84s about a few months after we got out of flying school.
Is that the Shooting Star? Or
No, it was the old Thunder. I think it wasn't the Thunder Chief. Thunder Jet, I think they called it then. But it was an old piece of junk. It had 3,800. They called it the hog. It had to sniff the end of the runway and decide whether it was going to fly or not. A barbed wire fence at the end of the runway, and you just barely get over the fence.
It wasn't a fence safe at the end of that beast, right?
And we didn't have any takeoff charts in those days. You just put your finger. I think I can make it. So you just cranked up and took off. Some guys didn't. They ended up off the end of the runway.
And that was before afterburners and any of that stuff.
Oh, you didn't. 3,800 pounds of thrust. Just an old dog.
Yeah.
And anyway, we flew those for a year at South Carolina, and I was not happy with that airplane, and I wasn't happy with the outfit. They treated the ops officer would say, okay, you pilots today are going to do a certain thing, and you new heads will go out and paint fence posts or do all kinds of stuff. You know, just really treat us bad. So I made up my mind from then on, if I got, when I got to be a commander, I was going to have all the new pilots. I was going to have their name tag, their locker, their name tag on their pilot lounge the first day, and I was going to fly them the first day they reported in. And I had more guys stay in the Air Force because I started them off really well instead of the way I was treated when I came in.
So is that, we'll come back with the Duke Schneider here after a short break, and he'll get us back into the F-86 and his 100 missions in Korea. You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour.
Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552 or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face-to-face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
Veterans served us, now it's time we serve them. As a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as a current military member deployed abroad, I would like to take a minute of your time to tell you about Patriot Hills of New York. Patriot Hills of New York is a nonprofit organization providing support to veterans and their families. They partner veterans in need with over 65 health and wellness organizations, community groups, as well as philanthropic foundations providing no or low-cost services. They've helped over 400 veterans through confidential referral services, assistance with veterans issues, employment placement, as well as educational opportunities. If you need assistance or just want to help veterans by donating your time or services, contact them at info@patriothills.org. Again, that's info@patriothills.org. Visit patriothillsofnewyork.com for more information about their services or how you can donate. Our veterans deserve no less. We can give it to them, and you can help.
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour, and we're back with Major General Carl Schneider, call sign Duke. And he's going to take us back to what? Shaw Air Force Base, flying the F-84.
Well, as I said, the old 84 was really an old dog, but we used to go to gunnery down in Florida, and we'd go down to a bear base, studying how to go into a bear base and survive. And we'd shoot gunnery every day. And then we'd go back to Shaw. And one of the flights, I took off with the flight, and we got back okay. And the flight behind us didn't report in. And nobody could find them. And turned out the flight commander was an old World War II guy that wasn't very sharp. And they got lost and ran out of fuel, and all four of them bellied in. And this, the part of the funny story, nobody got hurt. Amazing. That whole thing was built like a cast iron skillet. And this one guy was going to come in. He found an open field, so he came in and touched down, and he still had quite a bit of speed, and there was a car coming along a road, and so he still had enough, probably ricocheted off the grass, went across the road where this car ran right under him, went down this hill and poked his nose about 3 feet into this lady's kitchen, and just enough to raise the canopy. So he raised the canopy, unstrapped, walked around the front door, knocked on the front door, and asked this lady if he could use her phone. She said, "You're not going to use my phone, buddy." He said, "You torn up my house, or you walk 2 miles down the road, use the neighbor's phone."
You find your own damn phone.
So anyway, we had a lot of fun doing all kind of stuff there. And one day I got up. We didn't have very good instrument training out here in Arizona, so I was out plumbing around in a single seat airplane by myself one day, and I saw this what we call a sucker hole, great big opening in the clouds. And I thought, I'll get out on top and see how the weather looks. Got out on top and it closed in.
Oh, you couldn't get back through.
We're out over the swamps of South Carolina, and everything looked the same. It's not like out here where you got roads. So I finally got the courage to come back down through the clouds, and everything looked the same. It just looked like swamps. And I was looking at my fuel, and it's really getting low. But our procedure was you flew 30 seconds one heading and then 30 seconds here, and you just kept expanding it about 30, 40 seconds until you hopefully found a field.
A landmark or something.
And so luckily I started that routine, and by golly, I found the field. I was down to almost minimum fuel. And so I peeled off and landed, walked in, and officer said, "How'd it go, Lieutenant?" And I said, "A piece of cake, sir, no problem at all." But my first checkout, when we got there, I thought we'd have ground school and we'd have a lot of time. And I walked in ops, and they gave me a little -1, which shows you procedures of how to start the engine and what the takeoff speed was and landing speed and so forth. No ground school, no flight, no dual plane. And so I filled out this questionnaire. It's an open book thing. I used the -1, filled out the questionnaire, and the ops officer said, "Let's go up and have lunch." So I went up, had lunch, came back, and he said, "Get your chute and helmet, and let's go out and look around the airplane." And we didn't have jet helmets at that time. You just had an old, your old leather P-51 helmet, and then everybody went down and got a football helmet. You looked like Newt Rockney, this old round helmet, and you put the thing under here, and you had your earphones in your P-51 helmet. So I didn't even have a jet helmet. So he loaned me his, and we walked out, and I thought we were just going to pre-flight. So we walked out and did a pre-flight, and he said, "Get in the cockpit." And he said, "You know how to start it?" And I said, "Well, I think I know what the book said." And he said, "I'll do it for you." So he pulled it, got the power unit over, and F-84 had the scoop in the nose, so you could put the ladder right up with the cockpit. So he reached in the cockpit, actually started the engine. And I was sitting there looking at everything, and he said, "I got to give you a blindfold cockpit check." And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I know where everything is." And he said, "Well, close your eyes and I'll give you a blindfold check." So he moved my hand around to where the start switch was and all this stuff. And I was still sitting there just really interested about it. And next thing I knew, he hit me on the shoulder and said, "Go fly."
Gosh.
And man, you talk about, my knees were shaking so bad I couldn't even hold the rudders down. And luckily I got out the end of the runway, and they cleared me right on the runway, and I just poured the power to it and took off. And I said, "It's a piece of cake compared to the P-51, it's a tricycle landing gear." And so I got up and flew for about 30 minutes and did stalls and just tested everything out, came in, and like in most planes, the first landing is always good. So I made a good landing, and nobody was around. I taxied in, shut down, and walked in ops, and he said, "Oh, you survived." And that was the theory. If you killed yourself, you weren't any good anyway.
Those were stick and rudder guys. That was a different Air Force there.
Absolutely.
That was a real Air Force.
Anyway, I probably had 5 or 6 hours of jet time. And the ops officer came in one day and he said, "Carl," said, "you're the high guy." I said, "Why don't you take Pete here and you guys go get 20 hours of flying?" And I said, "Well, any instructions?" He said, "No, just go get 20 hours and we'll see you when you get back." So we took off and we went to Florida, and we came to Texas, and we came out to Arizona and California and up to Washington and back through.
Were you big in the yacht clubs in each one of those bases?
Oh, yeah. We had good stuff.
Telling everybody about what you're doing on this great airplane.
about 10 days later, we showed up on initial approach with 20 hours of flying time. Walked in the office and he said, "How'd it go, boys?" And we said, "Fine, had a good time." He said, "Okay." Can you imagine letting 2-second lieutenants take off, do that in this day?
Not anymore.
Well,
And,
only in Vietnam maybe would be allowed. But
anyway, we had some guys that came back from the 36 fighter group in Germany, and they're flying F-80s over there. And I wanted to go to Germany. Of course, my grandfather had been from Germany, so that was sort of a long-term goal. So every month I'd go down to the order room and I'd put in a request to go to Germany. And so one day the commander walked in and said, "Carl, we got your orders." I said, "Good. Am I going to Germany?" He said, "No, you're going to Okinawa." So that
a lot of Germans in Okinawa.
that was the armpit of the Air Force at that time. 1949, old ships still stuck out of the harbor, and
Sure.
there wasn't a building any higher than 6 feet off the ground. It just total devastation. And we had we're living in these old Quonset huts and had 2 little bedrooms and a little bitty living room and a little kitchen and a bathroom. And our sport was shooting rats off the ceiling with our shots.
With your 45s?
With our 45s, yeah, we put this bird shot in there and shoot rats off the ceiling. And we had 1 nail on the wall to put your clothes on and an old GI cot, and that was it. But we had a chaplain that was in one of the rooms trying to keep order with 3 fighter pilots. Catholic chaplain, and he and I got to be good buddies, and he liked to say mass at different places around the Pacific, and he liked to fly. So I used to fly him to get a T-bird after we got T-birds, and I'd fly him around the Pacific so I could say mass. And my dad was the most prejudiced guy I've ever known. If you weren't a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you weren't nothing. Well, old chaplain Greco and I got to be good buddies, and when the war started, he wanted to go with us to Korea, and he was from some church in New Jersey, and so he called back there, and they wouldn't let him go. They said, "No, you've served your time. You come on home." That son of a gun came by my home in Texas, didn't tell me and didn't tell my folks. Walked up the door, knocked on the door, and here I'm going off to combat. My folks didn't know whether I was going to survive or not. They didn't know what was going on. And he spent 3 days with my folks. And from then
Catholic
on,
priest talking to your dad.
Dad thought Catholics were the greatest folks in the world.
A conversion right there in Texas.
So tell us a little bit about Korea.
Well, we after the war started, we went up to they were bringing new F-80s over and assembling them, bringing over on ships, and they assembled them at Kisuru Zoo there in Tokyo Harbor. And then they'd ferry them up to Misawa at the very north end of Japan. And so we went up there to pick up F-80s, F-80C models. We've been flying the old A model. And so I went up to pick up one day, and I decided that they'd already started combat. The war just started. And I didn't know whether we were going to go or not. And I figured I needed to get into combat. So I got my airplane in Misawa, and I landed in Tokyo. And I flew into Itazuki, and I went up to the wing commander. I said, "I want to fly combat with you guys." And he said, "Well," he said, "Well, we don't have any extra airplanes." I said, "I got my own airplane." He said, so they loaded me up, and I flew 12 missions. And I came in one afternoon. Here was the wing commander and the
You 12 missions in Korea?
Well, out of Japan into Korea.
Okay. Was this a bombing mission?
Oh yeah, they loaded them up with bombs and rockets and everything else.
And who coordinated your strike in Korea when you flew?
I just flew with one of the squadrons, and
well, you came with your own airplane.
My own airplane. I flew down. I said, "I'm ready to fly you guys." So
it's like, why wouldn't you?
I landed one day, and here's the wing commander and the security police and all these other folks. And wing commander said, "Who are you and where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Okinawa." And I said, "I wanted to fly combat." And he said, "Well, your wing commander called, and they've been looking for you now for several days here." And said, "Your wing commander said, get your butt back to Okinawa." I said, the wing down there is fixing to come to Korea. And said, "You get back down there." So I got back down, and the wing commander was a tough old guy, and he got me and just chewed my butt out. Said, "Who do you think you were to do that?" And then he started laughing and said, "Get down there and teach these other guys how to fly combat." So a few days later, we got orders for the whole outfit to go. So we all moved back to Itazuki. And this was when right at the beginning of the war, when we just had the Pusan perimeter. So we'd load up and have 4 rockets and 1,800 rounds of ammo and a couple of 500-pound bombs. So we'd fly from Itazuki and then hit the target all around the Nakdong River and the Pusan perimeter.
How did you know what targets to hit? Was there somebody advising you?
Well, yeah, we'd get orders, frag orders
Right.
to hit them. And of course, they were pretty obvious because all our troops were, just flooding in from Japan, and they were on this side of the river.
Sure.
And the North Koreans were just flooding down and out in the open, tanks and trucks.
Oh,
and
you
so
could
forth.
see them pretty well.
Oh yeah,
And hose them down.
So you just come around and shoot at anything that was north of the river,
Uh-huh.
and then go in and land, refuel, rearm, load up again, go hit them another time, come back and hit them again, third time, and then go back in Japan because we didn't have parking space there at Taegu. So we flew that way until the Incheon invasion. And then we were I landed the first jet at Kempo right after the Incheon invasion. And then we flew out of there then and hit all targets up to the north, up to the Yalu until about late November, early December.
Did you switch to the F-86 at that time?
No, we're still in F-80s. And then the Chinese came through, so we burned everything. We just, we hadn't had our clothes off for 3 months there. We didn't have a shower. We didn't have anything. We just built, all the pilots got together and built a shower. And you could strip off and take a cold shower. You don't need to have a heating shower.
Yeah.
And we just got it built, and the Chinese came in, so we had to burn everything.
Those Chinese.
And we headed back to Itazuki then, and flew out of there then, and then moved over to Swiki across
in Japan.
the mountains to an old kamikaze base. And that's where you were asking me the story about getting kicked out of the club. We'd all been flying combat, and we didn't care what the school kept or not. And the squadron commander said, let's go down to Beppu to this Army Officers Club and have dinner. So we got a bus, and we went down to this club, and here was all these colonels and their wives with their tuxedos and all sitting in the main dining room. And we were in this room just about like this, in a side room. And we started having a few adult beverages, and the waiter didn't come in and take care of us. They were taking care of all the colonels and all the other VIPs.
You're a lieutenant at the time?
Well, yeah, I was a lieutenant then, and the squadron commander was he's an old World War II guy, and he's a pretty loose guy. And so we sat there, and they were bringing us drinks.
And you're in your flight suits and everything, right?
Yeah, but they didn't bring any food. So they had these great big windows, French windows, and the bus was sitting right outside the window. And after about an hour of this, we'd all been hitting it pretty heavy and no food. Squadron commander said, well, if they don't like us here, let's go home. And so we all just stood up and walked across the table and climbed out the windows and got on the bus and went back to the base and got there, and the wing commander was waiting on us. And he said, you guys made several $1,000s worth of damage. And said, you're going to have to pay for the damages, and you're forever forbidden to come back to the Beppu Army Officers Club. So
that's
pretty
funny.
interesting days there. But
So then you moved on to Vietnam. Was really your third war.
So you did 100 missions there in Korea.
well, yeah, we flew 100 missions. We lost out of the 32 guys that left Oki, we lost 22,
No kidding.
and only 2 of them got out of prison camp. And the squadron commander lost a leg when he bailed out, and he evaded, and a friendly North Korean hit him in a dike for a few days, and then gangrene set in his leg, and he finally had to give up, and they just sawed his leg off with no anesthetic. And he was a tough old turkey. He was anyway, a fellow Marine, which I later met when I was going to Marine Corps school, made a wooden leg out of a bedpost and a peg leg for him. And he was he treated the North Koreans so bad that they put water over his head and pour water on it and set him out in the middle and let it freeze and so forth. but he was writing a diary on every scrap of paper he could get, and he was poking it down in the hole in this
wooden leg.
And the wooden leg. And then when he came across the bridge, when they released him, the North Koreans hated him, so they yanked his wooden leg off and made him hobble all the way across the bridge. Anyway, he ended up later on working for Sandia Corporation in Albuquerque. I used to see him for years. But he was shot down the day before I came home. And everybody in the tent had been shot down, except he and I were the only two left out of our tent. And his wife was from Clovis, so I got home.
New Mexico,
and I was from Plainview. So I went over to see her, and she said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He'll make it." Said he's tough as a boot. And sure enough, he did 2 years later.
Gosh.
But
is it time to take a break?
I
here,
think
Brittany?
it
I'm
is,
so
yeah.
enthralled with the story, I'm losing contract of everything else. Listen, you're listening to great stories, living history here on the Veterans Heritage Hour.
Veterans served us, now it's time we serve them. As a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as a current military member deployed abroad, I would like to take a minute of your time to tell you about Patriot Hills of New York. Patriot Hills of New York is a nonprofit organization providing support to veterans and their families. They partner veterans in need with over 65 health and wellness organizations, community groups, as well as philanthropic foundations providing no or low-cost services. They've helped over 400 veterans through confidential referral services, assistance with veterans issues, employment placement, as well as educational opportunities. If you need assistance or just want to help veterans by donating your time or services, contact them at info@patriothills.org. Again, that's info@patriothills.org. Visit patriothillsnewyork.com for more information about their services or how you can donate. Our veterans deserve no less. We can give it to them, and you can help. Everyone's going to need an attorney at some point in their life. I'm no different. Hey everyone, it's James from Vets On. Whether it was my last will and testament before deployment or my ongoing custody battle for my children during my divorce, I needed help, so I lawyered up. If you need help, I urge you to contact Capstrom Law Firm. Capstrom Law Firm in Springfield, Missouri services clients throughout the state in criminal law, personal injury, and family law. With over 13 years practicing law, Tom Capstrom understands both law and court procedures and how stressful they can be. Let Tom Capstrom Law Firm and his dedicated staff take the stress and worry out of a difficult situation by calling him today. We feel so strong about the work that Tom and his staff are doing that he'll be a monthly guest on the show. Tom is a veteran and a listener, for God's sake, so you know the guy is solid and will fight for you. Give Tom a call today by calling 417-864-0552. or email Tom at capstromlaw.com. And don't forget to tell him that Vets On sent you.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertising.
If you or someone you know is looking for a new job or career, you need to visit the pros. National Career Fairs at ncfairs.com. National Career Fairs hosts over 300 career fairs a year nationwide. The events are free and give you the perfect chance to meet some of the top employers in your area face to face. To find the nearest career fair to you, visit ncfairs.com. Again, that's ncfairs.com. What are you waiting for?
You're listening to the Veterans Heritage Hour on the Vets On Media Network.
We're back with the Veterans Heritage Hour, and we're talking to the Duke, a great stick and rudder guy, and we're now in Korea with his unit, and he's about ready to come home. And how did the Korean tour wind up? You had a lot of casualties.
Well, I got orders back to Luke, and an F-80 instructor, and I wanted to fly another 100 F-86s, and they wouldn't let me. So I'd been shot up so much, so I came back here, and I was always a time hog, so I was always hanging over the option desk, taking any flight that would come along. And Wing Commander walked in one afternoon. He said, "I need one volunteer to go to Nellis. They're going to start a very aggressive air-to-air F-86 program. Any volunteer?" "Yes, sir." And he said, "How soon can you go?" I said, "They need you right away." And I said, "Yes, sir." I was in the BOQ. I said, "I can leave in 15 minutes. So I whipped out, went up to BOQ, packed my bag, got in my car, and drove to Las Vegas. And about 3 months later, I got a call from a sergeant at Luke, said, "Sir, we've been trying to find you for 3 months. You've been AWOL." Said, "We finally found you here." Said, "You didn't sign out." And I said, "Oh, well," he said, "I'll take care of it." And that's the last I ever heard of it. But I got up there and they treated me like a king. I was the first returnee back from Korea up there. Well, I was the first returnee at Luke also. And, but it was wonderful. I was flying 75 hours a month.
Wow.
I volunteered to be the functional check flight pilot. It wasn't, you know, you have to go up and test the airplane after it's been in maintenance. So I'd fly a test flight just at sunrise, and I'd go fly with 3 gunnery students, shoot gunnery all day and do air-to-air and all the other stuff. And I'd go back and fly another one. Then I'd take off on a weekend. I'd fly 10 or 15 hours on the weekends running all over the country.
Now, you'd been there a while, and tell us a little bit about how you got to Vietnam.
Well, as I said, the years went by, and I had a squadron here at Luke, and I said, "Where's Vietnam?" And the general said, "Oh, they call it Indochina." I said, "That's what everybody knew it as." And so I couldn't find anything at all about it. So I came down to the library here in Phoenix, and I found a book called "The Parish of the Orient," and it was about Saigon. So I went. It was a secret orders at that time, so I had orders to go to Clark, and then I had to report in
the Philippines
to a colonel there in Manila and Clark, and then flew into Saigon at night. And it's the only time I've ever been turned around, because I thought Tan Son Nhut was on the southeast corner of Saigon. It really was in the northwest corner. But when I'd fly, take off, just looked like my gyro did 180 degrees, and I was perfectly oriented in the air. And when I'd land at Tan Son Nhut or at Bien Hoa, as I'd roll down the runway, my internal gyro would turn around and I'd be 180 degrees out. Only time it ever happened in my whole flying career. But anyway, I started getting all the forward air controllers and air liaison officers there. And one of my first ones was Tom McInerney, who's now on Fox News.
Sure.
And Tom was one of my young lieutenants. And I said, "Tom, I think you got good potential in the Air Force. You're a good guy." So he's retired lieutenant general. And I email with him all the time. Sure. He's a really great guy. But anyway, the Tiger story, I don't want to forget that. I had a bunch of buddies down in the Delta. And
you're now the liaison for the forward air control mission.
Yeah, I was coordinating all the forward air controllers.
And you're living in Saigon, and you're having your unit is down in the Delta, and you're flying down.
Well, I'd fly out of Ben Hoa or out of Tan Son Nhut with VNAV. And so they sent a helicopter up and picked me up, and they had a ulterior motive, of course. And I got down.
You're a major at this time, or
yeah, major. So I got down to this place in Mito, Canto, somewhere down in the south of Saigon, and they had an old French officers club that had great big open windows, and so they seated me right up with my back to this big open window, and it's about so high, about shoulder high. And of course, all the guys started stacking their beer cans up right in front of me, and so they got them up as high as they could get them. And they'd been over to Thailand and got this little tiger cub. And by the time I got there, they'd had him defanged, so it didn't hurt anybody. He was about 8 feet long. And so the guy that ran the tiger, when they got everything ready to go, then the guy would holler, "Hoo-ha!" And this tiger would come out and jump him. And he was tied to a stop. And he'd put his paws right over your shoulder and let out this loud roar right in your back of your head. And of course, you just scattered beer cans all over the club. And if you didn't have a heart attack, that was your initiation. You died. Well, you died, you know. So that's my tiger.
Are you hearing that, cat killers out there? We never did anything. I want to hear that story. You can't beat that story. That's one of the best O Club stories of all time.
Oh.
But anyway, I flew on the spray plane with. I had a buddy that flew one of the spray planes, and I trumped around in all that Agent Orange stuff and flew on the airplane, and so far I've never had any indication whatsoever. But I've got another buddy up here in Cave Creek that flew fighters, and they had some spray planes where he was flying, I guess out of Ben Hoa or Tui Hoa or somewhere. and he tromped through it and just got it all over his boots and in his feet. And he's got bad, he's had cancer now for about 20 years.
Wow.
And my son went over there as a security policeman, and he tromped around in it all around the air bases, guarding different air bases, and he's got diabetes pretty bad. So,
Wow.
But I was very fortunate.
You met Secretary McNamara there. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, I got a call one day. My boss said, I guess I was up at flying out of Playcool or somewhere up in the Highlands. And he said, Secretary McNamara and General LeMay and a whole bunch of congressmen and 4-stars and stuff are coming in. And I want you to come in and brief them. Said, you know more about what's going on over here than anybody, because I'd landed at every place you could get into in Vietnam.
In little airplanes.
In the F-19. We call them the F-19. I went down to
Not the L-19, the F-19. Right?
well, we're all fighter pilots.
Sure.
So I went down to Saigon and had them do a beret and make a patch. It shows the L-19, but says F-19 and facts under. And then I had them put a blue patch with wings and name tag on my fatigues. And so here comes McNamara and LeMay and all these other folks, and we didn't have any supplies, so I went down to Tudo Street and got one of these big flip charts and some magic marker, and I came up and made a briefing, and got through. And McNamara said, "Major, that was a good briefing." Said, "Looks like you know what's going on over here." Said, "What do you think we ought to be doing?" And I said, I think we ought to bomb all those targets around. I know, close Haiphong Harbor, get this thing over with. I think we can get out of here in 3 or 6 months. And it made it so bad he jumped up and ran out the door. And right behind him was General May, gave him a big thumbs up. And I made Lieutenant Colonel.
Curtis LeMay never met a place he didn't want to bomb, that's for sure. So you Sundowners, I want you to know I'm wearing the colors today. The general's looking at my Who Said Facts shirt, so we're on the record here. We're proud here in this studio today. So your tour in Vietnam ended, and you came back to the States, and you were then rising up in ranks. You got to be retired as a major general.
Well, I came back. I'd been working on a degree at ASU, and so I came back. Got orders back. They had me on orders to go to Armed Forces Staff College. And I came into Saigon one day for a briefing, and the director of personnel for the Air Force was in the briefing. And I got him aside afterward, and I said, General, I said, you know, I need a college degree a lot worse than I need Armed Forces Staff College. And I said, I've been working on a degree at ASU. How about canceling my Armed Forces Staff orders and let me come back to ASU and finish up? So sure enough, about 2 or 3 weeks later, I got orders changed and came right back to ASU. And
the Duke, we should mention, is in the Arizona Business School Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I went through the business school here and got my degree, and then made lieutenant colonel while I was there, thanks to General LeMay. And so then went back to Luke and had merged 2 squadrons then. The Top Gun Squadron, ran the Top Gun Squadron, and just loved every minute of it. And sitting around one day, and I got a call from the general, and he said, I want you to go to Fort Riley and be the Tactical Air Control Party Commander at the 1st Infantry Division. So I said, well, I'm real happy right here, General. He said, I didn't ask that. Be there in 10 days. so I got up there, and these idiots did the same trick on me up there that they did in Vietnam. They put me right up by the window, and all the staff came in the first afternoon and shaking hands. We're so glad to have you on board, and had the window up and the cannon right out behind it, and blew the cannon for retreat. And of course, I jumped up. So their initiation right again.
Listen, General, the time we have left, we got 3 or 4 minutes left, 2 minutes left. Wow. I don't know if you have any closing comments, or what is your opinion about, ASU has a center on the future of war. What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I just think that we're decimating the military, and we're getting rid of a lot of really good people, and it's not running the way it should be. We're the whole Middle East is on fire. We've had very bad policies over there. I think the morale is really down with a lot of people in the military, because they're letting a lot of ones go that really should be able to finish their 20-year service, that have done a good job. And I just think we need a national strategy to get that thing straightened around. And from all indication, we're not going to get it until we get some new administration.
Sure. If Curtis LeMay was around, what do you think he'd be having to say about
Well,
this?
I think it'd be a different ball of wax there.
You know, he wanted to carpet bomb Cuba at one time, and he was a bombing man.
Well,
He fired bomb.
he really was a very mild guy. When I was going to the Marine Corps, went through the Marine Corps school. We still got time?
Yep.
1 minute.
He came in as a guest speaker, and you know, everybody thought he was just a wild, crazy guy, but he's the most mild-mannered, easygoing, soft-spoken guy you've ever seen. And he just believed in power.
Yeah.
He believed that power would keep all these other people. It's better to have the power to do it. And we're seeing what's happening now because we're decimating our forces. The Chinese are building up. The Russians are building up. And we've got everything's on fire in the Middle East. And here we're downgrading our military. And so it's just not a happy deal. And it's not.
There's those who believe that if you have power, you know, sufficient enough that you will never have to use it.
That's right. Exactly right.
And that's one of the philosophies. That's one of the contemporary deals. So rules of thought here, contemporary thoughts. So is that it, Birdman? Are we wrapping up here? So next week we're going to have on Cap Dean.
Cap Dean.
Cap Dean was had a great career in USAID in the State Department and was the mayor of Baghdad. And he lives right here in Arizona. And we're going to have him on next week to talk about the cooperation between the military and the State Department and how we have power in hearts and minds and soft strategy as well.
So we will see you next week.
See you next week. We're wrapping up here.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proud